The air in the tunnels is cold and damp, almost palpable and thick. It smells of wet stone, mud, and copper. You're deep beneath the village farm, standing at the bottom of a well that hasn't seen a drop of water in weeks. You're here searching for a family, a father, his older son, and his young daughter. The silence is broken only by the sound of your own breathing and the squelch of your boots in the mud. Finally, you see her. The daughter is huddled in a corner, shivering and pale, but alive. As you move to reach her, however, your torchlight catches the bodies of the father and son nearby, lying among the corpses of worm-like creatures that resemble scaly bloodworms, red and long. That's when the silence ends. You don't see it yet, but you hear it. A shifting, squelching thud that vibrates through the damp floor. The mass is moving. Hello everyone! Welcome to episode 2 of Homebrewed Alchemy, where we take a look at the homebrew from my lore in our D&D campaigns, is specifically looking at the locations of Ambriel, the supercontinent, and Varheim, the islands of the Vilcor people. Today we are going to be looking at two monsters featured in the second episode of the Hell's Heart campaign, the Unraveling of Fate campaign, and we are going to be looking at the dracowyrm and something else. Starting off with the dracowyrm, it is basically just a lesser creature known as part of the Dracoidae family. Dracoidae are dragon-like creatures insofar as they are basically just scaly beasts, although some of them have some type of breath weapon, but it's definitely much lesser than the true dragons. So they are more like beasts in the world of Ambriel and Varheim. But we are going to look at its stat block first, and just a note, since the airing of that second episode and running it, I have updated all of my stat blocks to 5.5e D&D 2024, just to be compatible with the new rules, and I've gotten a bit better at making stat blocks since then, especially removing unnecessary bloat and making sure everything is following the new rules conventions. So let's take a look at the dracowyrm stat block here. It's nothing much to look at. It is the dracowyrm itself is a creature that looks a bit like a very large, and when I say large, relatively speaking, a large bloodworm. I was inspired by bloodworms in terms of the appearance of these dracowyrms. So, yeah, nothing much to look at here, although they do hunt in groups, families, packs, whatever you want to call them. So they do have the pack tactics trait here, where they have advantage on attack rolls against creatures that are basically surrounded by these things, so long as they're not knocked unconscious or what have you. Other than that, it has a simple bite attack that deals a bit of piercing damage, and a spit attack that deals a bit of acid damage. Other than that, the only unique thing about these guys is their reaction, Underground Ambush, where if a creature rolls initiative and they're surprised, i.e. having disadvantage on that roll, the dracowyrm can move up to its burrow speed of 40 feet and make a bite attack against the triggering creature. So that's basically the dracowyrm. It doesn't have much HP, about 10 HP on average, AC of 12. Decent stealth though, but resistance to poison damage, interestingly enough. and a decent range of blind sight and tremor sense. So living underground, subterranean monsters, they are very hard to ambush themselves. But these guys are nothing in compared to the creature, the boss monster that was in the cave the party explored. As they were searching for the missing family, the son of an old farmer and his grandchildren, who had gone to investigate the well after they had realized it had been dried up, essentially not producing water for several days. So the party went down there to investigate, and unfortunately most of the family met a tragic end. The daughter was able to be saved, but what they encountered was a mass, an amalgam of these dracowyrms that basically formed into a huge monstrosity. And like I said, the stat blocks have been updated for 5.5e, so I made some changes and tweaks since that initial encounter, but overall it's the same. And taking a look at the mass here, it is a huge monstrosity. As I said, it has a decent AC of 15, 76 hit points. It is a CR4 creature, but it does have resistance to BPS, bludgeoning and piercing damage, but not slashing damage, and it carries over the resistance to poison damage. The changes I made to this stat block basically made it a little bit more ooze-like with a couple of its traits. Actually, just one of its traits. I gave it the amorphous trait, where it can kind of crunch itself down and squeeze through a gap as narrow as 5 feet. That doesn't cost it extra movement. And since it's just basically a mass, it doesn't really have a face. I know D&D doesn't really have facing, but if it did, it doesn't really matter for this guy, as it has advantage on attack rolls while it has a prone and restrained condition. That just means it cancels out the disadvantage it would get from that and just rolls flat. For its multi-attack, it uses flop once and then makes 3 slam or spit attacks. Now, these attacks don't deal a ton of damage, but the slam does a decent amount of damage, and the spit doesn't do a whole lot of damage, does almost the same amount of damage as a regular dracowyrm, except with a bit 2 extra average damage. But the main thing is the flop. The main ability it has is flops right down. And this took a couple tries to work out mechanically. I looked back on the episode and wanted to make sure that it ran a little bit more smoothly if I were to run a similar creature in the future. So basically, it now creates a 20-foot cube originating from itself, essentially, as it basically gives itself the prone condition as it falls, basically forcing a dexterity saving throw, DC 14. And if the creature fails to save, they take 2d12 plus 4 bludgeoning damage, average of 17. And they succeed, they take half damage. Now, failure or success, the mass occupies the cube space and it has the prone condition. But the caveat here is it must use all its movement to right itself. If a creature fails its save by 5 or more, it has the crushed effect, so long as the mass has the prone condition. While crushed, the target has the prone and restrained conditions and begins to suffocate, meaning it can't really speak. It's gagged for the purposes of casting spells with a verbal component, as can't even really say that I said fireball. So this thing is kind of like enveloping those it crushes. And in doing so gives the crushed creature total cover against attacks and other effects around the mass and deals extra and continuous bludgeoning damage, 1d8 bludgeoning damage at the end of the mass's turns. 5 smaller creatures can be crushed by the mass at a time, since it is quite huge. If a creature dies while crushed, it is absorbed or engulfed by the mass. To get out of this effect, the crushed effect, basically the mass has to take 30 plus damage in a whole round. If the mass dies, of course, or a crushed creature manages to score a critical hit against it, which is unlikely, but still possible. They can escape from the mass using half their movement, exiting prone, and no longer having the strained condition. So that's the main ability of this guy. Basically, if a party's all grouped up, they're going to pay the price. It has a bonus action of Detach Ally, which is a better version of Call Reinforcements, Call Allies, Summon Dracowyrm from the Dracowyrm mass itself. It basically detaches allies to attach itself in battle, which is determined by the mass's type. And I have a table down here in the description to go over where we can take a look at the types of masses that you might encounter in the world and that you might want to run in your games. And the Detach Ally ability is Recharge, and I like to not always use a d6 for recharge abilities to change the math a little bit. So in this particular case, it uses a d8, and it recharges on a roll of 7 or 8 on the d8. Excuse me. If we take a look at the table here, there are 6 types. Of course, you can do more than that. You can branch out to whatever type of amalgamation of different types of creatures you want for the mass. Basically, it's amalgamation of both dead and dying creatures, or just dead creatures, or if you want true horror, they're all still alive. It's created by a catastrophe of unnatural, elemental, and magical forces to kind of pull all these creatures together. In the case of the Dracowyrm mass, well, the biggest magical thing going on in that world, in that campaign, is the Rotblade. Is it the cause? We don't know. Not yet. But if we take a look at some of the mass types here on this table, we got Monstrosity, Undead, Elemental, Ooze, Plant, or Fiend. And the detached allies you can see here, most of them are going to be CR0 or 1/8 or 1/4. So you got the Sturge, the MCDM version from Flea Immortals, so just a little bit more dangerous. And the spit damage type, if we go back here, spit damage is dependent on the mass's type. So we can see the Monstrosity deals lightning damage, the Undead deals necrotic or cold if it's zombie or bone mass, a mass of rotting zombies or bones. The Elemental, Thunder may or may not make sense depending what you want to go for, but it diversifies the damage a little bit. And, you know, the Squelch of Mud could be magically amplified with this creature to create a thunderous boom for its spit attack. The Ooze, it deals a bit of acid damage, classic there. Plants deals poison damage, classically, although you could, if you really want to, do piercing damage as it splits out little twigs. Or slashing damage even. You can change up all these damage shapes if you want. And then, of course, the Fiend having Lemures as the detached ally. Some nice disgusting creatures there. But overall, that's the mass. A nice little CR4 creature that has very poor passive perception, so you can definitely sneak up on this thing. So it is definitely a little bit tanky, but slashing damage is not ignored by this guy. So feel free to take out those sham shears and start hacking away at this thing. And good luck in your future battles. And thanks for watching episode 2 of Homebrewed Alchemy.